Welcome to Season 9 of a Vietnam podcast, sharing the stories of people connected to Vietnam. So my name is Niall Mackay. I've been living in Vietnam since 2016 and hosting this podcast since 2019. I wanted to get to know people connected to Vietnam, whether they're Vietnamese or Viet Kieu or foreigners, whether they live in Vietnam or anywhere around the world, and share their story. So my guest today has a double degree, which is very unusual in Vietnamese culture. She has a degree in two very different subjects, business administration and fine arts. And we met at a networking event and she introduced herself as an art curator, which was the first and still only person I've ever met in Vietnam who has that job. So that's extremely interesting. So we're going to be talking today about what it means to work in commercial real estate and fine arts, which are two very, very different subjects. So my guest today is Tâm Nguyễn.
Thank you so much for pronouncing my name very correctly and a very beautiful introduction.
You are very welcome. My pronunciation was good?
Yes.
It's my signal of how bad I am at Vietnamese and how difficult it is that I can't even say names properly.
You can claim yourself perfect at it today.
Amazing, amazing. So you have a double degree in business administration and fine arts. Those seem wildly different and also against what Vietnamese students are allowed to study. So how did you end up studying those subjects?
You know, for Vietnamese, especially Asian parents, we always under pressure to be either an engineer and a doctor. And when I was very little, I claimed myself to be a doctor so I can just take people's money while I can just like helping them. But helping them is a secondary reason. Taking money and being rich is the mandatory. And then later on, when I grow up a little bit, I was kind of the only child, so I have to learn how to cope with the world, how to see beautiful things around. And that kind of started for my enthusiasm in art. But again, we cannot get away from doctor engineers. And by the time we have one more option, which is being a businesswoman. So I have to get along with that. I have no other options. Being engineer and doctor is way so harder. So yes. That's the start. It's
one of these things, you know, like stereotypes. Sometimes people say, oh, the stereotypes are never true. But this is one that's just with Asian parents. It's just 100% true. And it's repeated on this podcast time and time and time again. There's comedians that talk about it. All Asian people talk about it, right? And there was a comedian, I can't remember if it was Ali Wong or maybe it was someone else, I'm forgetting now, about how all Asian parents want their kids to be doctors for exactly what you said, to make money, right? But then the same parents won't go to a doctor because they don't want to pay the money. They're like, I'm not going to, the comedian did the whole bit, like, I'm not going to that doctor and paying him money, but you should be a doctor so other people can pay you money.
That is so true because my mom just does that 3 days ago. I told her, go to the doctor, get yourself checked up. No, why should I pay money for that? The same reason you told me to study a doctor.
It's amazing. And I think that's so many stereotypes are true, you know, like Scottish people like to drink. Doesn't mean all Scottish people are alcoholics. But we have a high rate of liver disease and other problems like that as well. So, yeah, stereotypes are definitely something that's true. So how did you manage to persuade your parents to let you study fine arts because you said I'll also be a businesswoman? Is that how it worked?
No, I was not succeed. And up until now, it's still very hard to tell them that I'm going out for a business meeting with an artist. Yes, but I managed to get my 2 degrees because of a scholarship. I got lucky to get that in my 3rd year of college. So I decided to stay. Mom, Dad, I got 1 year scholarship. Let me stay for 1 more year. That's how I persuade them. So apparently it worked.
So where did you get your scholarship for?
So basically it's a foundation within the school to help supporting students with very big motivations in fine arts. And because it was not very influential among the Asian people to be in fine arts. That's how I got it. And it was through a photography contest, I believe. Yeah.
You're a photographer as well.
Yes.
So where did you go study for your scholarship?
I went to Auburn. It's a small city, very beautiful, behind a mountain. It's 1 hour driving away from Seattle, Washington State.
Auburn,
yes. So
rain a lot.
it rained 9 months in a year. And the other 3 months is because I went back to Vietnam for summer. So I don't know how sunny it is.
So what was that like then? So you left Vietnam at what age?
I left Vietnam before I turned 16, slightly before.
How old were you when you left Vietnam for your scholarship?
I left Vietnam when I was 16. I spent 2 years studying for business, and I got my scholarship on my 3rd year.
Oh, so your whole university was in Auburn?
Was for business.
Ah, I thought you meant you were studying here. So
that's how I fight for my art degree.
Yeah. So you were already studying in Auburn?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what age did you leave Vietnam to go study overseas?
I left Vietnam when I was 16.
16? Yeah. What was that like? Why so young?
I know.
I could barely tie my shoelaces at 16. I can't imagine leaving my home country and going studying overseas.
I was so excited. Yeah, being a young kid.
So is this high school? You were finishing high school in America?
Yes. I was the youngest kid in the classroom for most of the time, and it was a proud moment.
Yeah. So what was that like then at 16, studying in America?
You know the song A Whole New World in Aladdin?
Yeah.
It's how it was. Yeah. It opened the eye to new things, and it was just not the things on songs, movies, people talk about. It was life-changing.
So America does a very good job of propaganda and promoting itself to the world in one way. And then I've lived there as well, and then obviously know a lot of Americans. And you go there, it's a very different world to what you see in the American propaganda movies. So what were the biggest differences that you noticed when you got to America that you were kind of shocked at? Like, oh, this is not what I expected.
So before I went to America, I watched a lot of action movies, Mission Impossible, and then all tons of fightings and superheroes. So America to me was big, large cities, super expensive, and the people are always very hyper. So they are always energetic. But when I went there, it was like a small village or small city, super small. And it locates aside from a mountain with rivers and with a lot of trees, and people were so nice. It was super surprised. And the first thing I remember was how America was so big. 16 years old, I was so excited, but so small. And then I got lost. I'm still get lost today. So I walked to the school in the morning. I walked past a burnt house. And that's how I remember to walk back home. But by the end of the orientation day, I tried to find a burnt house, but I couldn't because I got lost in the parking lot of the school. And I spent 3 hours walking around.
But isn't that's just that's America, right? Like, why does a school have such a big parking lot?
I know. And I asked everyone. I asked the security guy. I asked my teacher. I asked all the friends around. I walked on the way from my house to the school 20 minutes, and there was a burnt house. Do you know where the burnt house is? I have no idea. I tried to look up on Google as well, but there was zero news about it.
And it's just a small but a big difference with America. Because, even in the UK, we don't have a school with a massive parking lot. And it is something you see in the movies, like they all get in their car after school. That, to me, was always strange. Nobody in my high school had a car. You can't drive until you're 17 in the UK. And a lot of people leave school before then. And even if you were in school, I was still in school till after 17. Nobody I knew, I certainly didn't have a car. Never mind driving it to school. So, yeah, it's such a different thing. And then another thing as well, what you said there, give shit to Americans like I just did American propaganda movies, and that's more of America, the country, I guess. But American people are the nicest people.
I agree with that.
That was not a shock to me maybe, but I mean, Scottish people are nice and friendly, but in America, like, they're so friendly, so welcoming. And also, like you talked about as well, the vastness of America. I think everyone has this stereotype of New York, basically, like busy New Yorkers running about big cities. And I've barely seen any of America. And you think of like Yosemite and all these beautiful mountains like you were talking about, and Seattle. And yeah, I think the stereotype of America is maybe one that's not true completely.
Mm-hmm.
So then how long were you there for?
I was there about 3 years.
And was there a big Vietnamese community where you were?
I think there was. We were not hanging out with a lot of them because as college students, we hang around with each other in clubs and like not the clubs.
No, I know you mean school clubs, yeah. Just if anyone's listening and thinks she was in the club, it was a school club.
I was in America when I was 16, so different kind of clubs, guys.
Yeah. Saigon, you could probably get in a club at 16. America, not so much, right? And so what were people's reaction to you as a foreigner?
Well, I think for America, by the time we were in a fairly friendly community, and there were many international students, so we get connected.
Mm. So originally your parents wanted you to be doctor, lawyer, accountant, all of this stuff. And is that's what inspired you then to get into arts, or is it something that you've always had? It's something I feel like is a shame for a lot of Vietnamese and Asian young people that they're not pushed, or they're kind of pushed away from that creative side. So how did that come out with you?
I think this is one of the stereotypes of the other people looking at us, like feeling empathy and sorry for us not getting close to the creativity side. But Nguyen say if you put a force on something, there is always an anti-force, and that helps us keep going. So if my mom and dad has always been very supportive, I wouldn't have this much strength to get a scholarship because I would be a spoiled brat, I would say, like just leaning into my parents' money and then, hey, I want to buy this, I want to get the other ones. So I think it helps in some ways. I study art, so I spend extra effort to prove that. Now I get my job in real estate and then I start to collect, so I know how hard it is to be an artist. And I made a decision myself for not being an artist and to be an art curator and / collector myself, so I can be a part of that process. If they allow me to be an art person, an artist, I would have been painting right now. And I mean, it's not just like how I add to the work, but it's just a different values. So I think that for different cultures, you promote other people in different ways. And in Vietnam, especially in Asia, we get promoted by not being promoted.
Well, one of the things I thought was so interesting when I first met you that time was the fact that you are an art curator. And like I said, you're the first and still only person that I've met that does that here. And it's so crucial, right? Because you need the artist, but you also need someone to curate it. So that must be really amazing here to then go out and find all this art, because then you're giving a platform to these artists. And it's something here as a foreigner, especially here in Vietnam, I'm not a big art person. I'm not into going to a museum and looking at art and things like this, but I will do it every now and again if it's there. But it's one of the things I miss the most in Vietnam, because I feel like one thing for me is the lack of like street art. And I know part of that is because Vietnam is just developing so quickly. They got to build stuff. They got to build buildings. There's not yet. I think it's probably coming, and this is what I'd like to hear more from you. I don't think there's yet that, because it's still developing. It's a thing that a developed country does. Okay, now we're developed. Let's build some art. And I don't think Vietnam's there yet, but I'm excited for when it does. The example recently was, well, not recently, COVID, it was like 10 years ago now. Now, a few years ago, we went to Taiwan, and Taiwan's just full of, every city you went to, there's just full of urban artwork, and you can just walk around and check it out. And again, it's not something that I'm inherently into, but now I've been in Vietnam for so long that I don't see it. Now I really appreciate it. So that's a long-winded way from you curating art, but now, let's talk about street art. where is Vietnam with that? Is that coming? Are people thinking about that, doing that?
I think that in terms of street arts, it's more of the propaganda thing from the government to support the art, first of all. So let's say about Taiwan, and nearer to us is Singapore. I know it's not for comparison at all, but in terms of public art, in terms of street art, we need a lot of support from the government and from the organizations, because in that way we get the acknowledgement from the public to continue the cycle, you know? So when people see art, it's more accessible, it's more friendly, or it's friendlier. And for Vietnam, it's not there yet. We are not thinking about art yet. We're thinking about how to make space more accessible. And I think that's the first step. For example, the walking street in Nguyễn Huệ, if you pay attention to it, there are some sculptures around. The good thing is that they're putting sculptures in popular places, in common ground. But the sad thing is that they put it away from the public eye. So it would be better if they just put it a little bit into the walking street so that people can get to see it, to just first start to question, what is it about? Who created it? What is it made of? And then they can kickstart, they can initiate the discussion with the person they are with or anyone around. They can just ask. From my last trip to Singapore, like first trip away from Vietnam after COVID 10 years ago, I think that they did a really good job at public art. So they put sculptures, they put the playground with very interactive materials in the parks in front of every single commercial buildings. So I think that's a very good way to just like inject the idea of art is around us into people around. They don't have to think about it. They just have to walk through it. And then one day, oh, I walked through this 10 million times. What is it? So yeah, we're getting there. We're not yet there, but we're getting there.
No, that's good. Yeah, and it's interesting. Like you say, well, like I said, I'm not into art. So I probably similarly in other countries walk by things 100 times. Mm-hmm. But then it's nice that it's there. I haven't seen these sculptures on Walking Street. So it's interesting you say they don't put them front and center.
We'll be right back.
Join pilot and adventurer Fernando Pino as he takes you on journeys to discover exciting destinations across the UK and Europe. You'll fly with him to hidden gems and experience local culture, from bustling streets to serene hideaways and the best places to eat, sleep, and play. Travel Plans is more than a podcast. It's your ticket to exploring the world and its history with a friend. In this episode, we are flying to discover a beachside paradise perfect for the whole family. Discover golden sands, activities galore, and even free childcare so you get your own break too. Why am I still here?
No, they put it aside. So the biggest sculpture in the walking street is Uncle Ho.
Yeah.
And that's totally understandable. That's what we do, okay? That's what we think. So if you walk around near the new MRT stations, there are some sculptures around. I think they are made of marble. I don't know who the author is, but I think those are prominent sculptors. Yeah.
Oh, check that out. Yeah. This is the dichotomy, right? Because there's the doctor, lawyer, engineer thing and the difficulty of being an artist. But there are so many artists here. There are so many people doing things like hip hop and DJ, whatever. Like, I can't even think of them off the top of my head, but there's so many different arts forms going on, fashion designers. So the art is out there. It's not like it's completely restrictive that nobody's doing anything. And that's what I think will be exciting, especially with younger Vietnamese generation coming through. I'm excited for when this will come, like more street art, more modern art as well, because I'm not knocking Vietnam because it is still developing very fast. When do you think that then, or maybe as an art curator, this is your job, you have to do it. For me, when I think of Vietnamese art, I just think of traditional art and part of that is maybe down to like a lot of the tourism shops. They just have like traditional paintings because that's what tourists come and they want to buy that. And it is something that Vietnam is well known for. I would love to see some more modern Vietnamese art. Is that coming or is it here already and I just don't see it?
I think it's a little bit of both. So basically, we had a discussion before with a few curators, and one of the concepts that keep me thinking is that being an art curator, we are the people who pick the stone, turn it around, and see gems in it so that we can show the world. So basically, for the contemporary art in Vietnam, I think that it has been improving so much from the last 5 years. Artists are getting more acknowledgements. They are reaching out for more exposure. And they're getting supports as well from art collectors. And I think before, from what you see when people think about Vietnamese art, it's more or less the Indochine or the Indochina. And recently we had an exhibition of the Sotheby's as well, and it showcased the Indochina art. It's good. It's there. That means that we have a foundation. What we really want to show the world now is the contemporary art and how we are reacting with that. So I see that people are drawing with construction foams, iron, and even blood. So
blood,
cow's blood, and
Okay.
human's blood.
And human's blood.
Yeah. So yeah, really believe that art, especially contemporary art of the living artists, are the ones that we should be focused now. In terms of art collectors, before we had a lot of people in terms of like high net worth, and they only focus on Indochina art because that yields the highest returns and the highest collectible values for them. What I have trying to observe right now is the people around my age who are trying to understand art by going to museum more, going to exhibitions more, get themselves exposed, learn about it, talk about it, and maybe try to collect them. They can start with very small values one and make it more and more in terms of collections. There are also some kind of programs or schemes that the artists can agree to support to make the collectors more enthusiastic in terms of collectibles. From what I see, sometimes the artists can agree to, like, you don't have to pay a lot at once. You can pay in sections. And it helps the artists for not being pressure of getting a lot of money at once and then spend everything to the art materials. It helps both ways. So it's a very positive view to the future of the arts as well. And one thing is that I think that there are a lot of artists are willing to use Google Translate, and they are willing to learn art, or they're willing to lean more to the people who speak better English. So it helps them in terms of explain their ideas more clear and more throughout, and as well as helping them get to the programs and getting the exposures they need.
This is why when we first met, and I was really interested to have you on the podcast, because for me, as I've already exposed myself, I'm not a huge art person, but it really interests me and fascinates me. As I mentioned, I've been here 6 years now, and I see the lack of art in public spaces, or even like in terms of museums, like a museum of modern art. It's all things that I never noticed until they weren't there, I guess. And so now, even as you're talking, it's making me realize a few things. Okay, so one, art comes after your basic needs are met, right? So again, I'm so privileged and lucky to be where I'm from, that for hundreds of years we have this art, because there have been people. I mean, I'm from Scotland and I'm from a modest background, so I don't mean like my direct ancestors, but I mean people in the UK, aristocrats, right? I mean, those were the people who did art because they had the money that they didn't need to work and they didn't need to fend for themselves. So art comes from, and I know someone listening to this might be like, Neil, you sound like an idiot, of course. So yeah, maybe I didn't study art history. I don't know this stuff. I'm sure if you studied art history, you already know this stuff, but I'm just kind of thinking about it out loud now. So my point related back to Vietnam, though, is even in the West, art came from people who had the means to produce it. And in Vietnam, especially in the last 100 years or so after the war and whatnot, and then obviously they had massive poverty in the 80s, right? Early 80s, 70s, famine. Not many people have the time or the effort or the energy to produce art when they need to feed themselves.
I think in that way, during that time, people have different ways to express art. So instead of painting on fancy canvas, like the Eastern artists, we paint on rice bags. We paint on everything, on the tank sometimes. And those can come back and become like a war museum showcase.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I probably sound like an idiot because people are always going to be creative, right? And then those become more valuable over time because it's a piece of time if someone painted on a rice bag. But so following on from my ridiculous point that I'm making is, I guess as well, art is very much funded in the West by government, right? And people get art grants, and then you always have the stereotype of the struggling artist, which is again probably not a stereotype that's untrue, and most artists probably struggle at some point because it's generally not a well-paid job. And again, relating back to Vietnam, in a country that's been through so much, the number one priority, and I don't know what it is now, is probably art funding is not high on the lists of priorities of the government when there are so many other things. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast. Obviously, Vietnam's developing so quickly. There are some super rich people here, but there are also some very poor people. And I've helped build a school in the Mekong Delta where they literally didn't have enough money to rebuild the school. So it's still a very real, and there's still hundreds of other schools out there that need funding, and there's still people out there that need help. So where is art sitting now on that scale of being funded publicly, or is it all in the hands of private collectors?
No, it's 50-50. We get some sponsors from publications, newspaper, and media. We get also sponsorships from consulates, especially from the French and the Japan foundations. I've been working with some organizations that have been sponsored by them. And I think that going to exhibitions that takes more and more observance. So people from corporates like me, people from the governments as well, and maybe students as well. So in my corporate, one time my colleague have to get a day off herself to get her child to an exhibition. So the fact that exhibitions are hosting everywhere and it's expanding the people who are going there, it's very interesting to see. And kids getting exposed to art, how wonderful it is.
That must be amazing for you as an artist, art curator working in the industry. I got one more point to make on my stupid ramble, and then you can tell me to shut up. And it ties back into what we were talking about, you got to be a lawyer, doctor, engineer. Are there many programs offered here in Vietnam that do art history? Because it's one of these programs, even in the West, if someone's like, oh, you're doing art history, that's like a wasted degree, like even in the West now, I think, and I hate always making these differences, but they are very different. Even in the West, if you're doing a degree like art history or what's the other one? Philosophy, people are going to kind of judge you on that, be like, what kind of job are you going to get with that? Like Egyptology, I saw something about that lately. Really interesting subjects, but we live in this world now, it's like, well, how are you going to make money from that? So in a society like Vietnam where there's so much emphasis on doctor, lawyer, engineer, are there programs for art history here, and how difficult would it be for a Vietnamese student to tell their parents, I want to go study art history?
There's a university or some college program in District 7 that's called Fulbright. They give out art histories classes that in a way that can incorporate both the world and Vietnam art history all together, as well as philosophy. So from my own perspective, philosophy is needed, history is needed, but I'm not a good historian because I cannot remember things. I'm very sorry to say that, but this is how I am. So that's why I focus in contemporary, because I don't have to remember anything else.
I love it. I would be the same. Shortcut. Yeah, I don't need to remember all that. Let's just focus on what the future.
But being an art curator requires you to know the art history, requires you to understand the philosophy around the art. So it's not a popular program for Vietnamese to take. I see very rare cases that people can study that in a way that they can study an engineer, doctor, lawyer thing. But there are also programs, very rare, but there is. So I think just stepping stone, then we can make the ripples.
And I find it so interesting thinking of where Vietnam is. And again, like I mentioned earlier, you just see the buildings going up so quickly and it's just such a visible sign of the development. But it's exciting to think about these other types of development as well in terms of art and, you know, maybe 10, 20, 30 years, more people studying art. But again, I see so many creative people here, which is amazing as well. So as a curator, you work for yourself, that's correct? I think knowing someone's an art curator, it's one of these jobs you don't really know what they do. You're like, yeah, they curate art, they choose art. But what does an art curator really do?
I think first of all is to have in mind knowing what they're doing and why they're doing what they do. So for me, I want to make the Vietnamese contemporary artists to go out the world, to join the Biennales and Triennales, the large major exhibitions, to get themselves out there. And for being a curator, it's to support them in the process, in their own journey. Why not making them pressure about the financial issues? So for a curator, what we do exactly is that we work with venues, we select a site, we select the artist, and we make it happen, we make the exhibition happen. It sounds might be very easy, but to determine how the environment matches with the energy of the artist and the energy of the artwork, it's very difficult. And sometimes we are very limited in terms of control. The curator comes in rescue. That's how I say it.
I don't think it sounds easy at all. I think anything with art, I mean, some people can just be like, oh yeah, that's easy. You know, there's like the, again, stereotype of someone sees a piece of modern art, which might be like a square on a canvas or some splashes of paint, and they're like, I could do that. That looks easy. I've probably had that thought myself as well. But it obviously is not that easy. And I think creating that atmosphere, matching the painting, it's definitely not easy.
So one thing that me and my friends, my art community often tells each other is that we have to ask the right question. So going back to the idea of picking stones and making into gems and showing the world. So asking the right question is like writing a research paper. So, you know, there's all tons of research paper all around in science, in math. And what are we telling the world? What is the artist trying to tell the world? So going back with the foamed artist making sculptures with foam, what is he telling the world? Why is he using this material instead of the other ones? And what kind of light will showcase the sculptures? It wouldn't be the same in the bedroom comparing to a living room or the nature light from the sun. And to understand the story, the materials, and the environment, it's what takes a curator job is, to make it easy to understand.
Thank you for explaining that then. So what's next for you then? What exhibitions have you got? What are your plans for art curation in Vietnam?
So to share with you a little bit about our plan is that we are making an exhibition with that artist again, but this time we're focusing not in foamed sculptures, we're focusing in iron sculptures. And the story briefly is that how he balanced the mental, the heart, and the hand. So basically the story is that how we go out to the world making money and how we feed our souls with. And we are at the initial stage, but hopefully by the end of this year, we can promote it and bring it to new observants, new exhibitions goers like you.
I cannot wait. Make sure you share that with me and share it with everyone that's listening. Tell us, where can we follow your page? I'll put the link in the description of the podcast as well. What's the name of it and where can we find it?
So the page initially is what we call Art Nè. It's a blend between English and Vietnamese. It might sound a little bit funny when I say it, but art, it stands for itself. And nè, it's a funny word. It's a word that says, indicating that I have something and I'm showing you that. Nè means here you go, here it is. And sometimes we use that word to introduce something new to other people. Hey, I know a new restaurant, nè. And that's the kind of a cute way, a friendly way to express that attitude. So I want to bring that energy into the artwork, that we are ready. We are willing to show you what we've got, what we've been trying, experimenting, studying, and then fighting to get. Here are the artworks that we're showing you.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, I'm excited to see the development of art in Vietnam over the next few years, and what you do with it. I'll be looking for your name behind it and make sure you share that with me. So we finished every episode with the same set of questions. So I'm going to ask you the same questions I ask every other guest. Number one, what one reason would you use to persuade somebody to come to Vietnam?
Since we've been talking about art, come to Vietnam and observe what we are going to be.
I like it. I like it. On the flip side, what one reason would you persuade someone not to come to Vietnam?
Well, I mean, in the meantime, you might have suffered from the traffic, but you can survive and see how Niall is surviving and thriving.
Do you know, when I came here, it's the number one thing people talk about, and it is crazy, especially in Saigon, the amount of bikes. And I swore I would never get on a bike myself. I would never drive myself. I was like, I'm just going to get taxis everywhere. They're cheaper here. It's fine. We're going everywhere by taxi. But I mean, they're cheaper, but not cheap enough that you can get a taxi. And it's not convenient all the time. I think it took me 3 months to get on a bike. Now it's crazy how much sense it makes once you get into it. It's just like flowing water. You just drive. But recently I noticed I was being a bit hectic because I was running about from place to place and I was driving too quickly. I nearly got in a few accidents and a few things. I was like, and I was always in my head blaming the other person. And then I was like, Neil, you're driving too fast. You need to slow down. That's the part of Vietnam as well. Everyone, you just drive slowly. And there are accidents, and the death rates here are really high. It's not completely safe, but the amount of accidents you see for the craziness are quite low, I think, anyway, for the volume of traffic. So I've started to slow right down now. It's much more relaxing.
That's good. I mean, I have nothing to add because I don't drive.
Oh my goodness, you don't drive?
No.
Are you Vietnamese?
That's exactly the question.
Have you ever driven?
Yes. So I think basically I can drive when there are not that many people around. And again, that's the question of whether you're driving too fast or too slow, because always other people from behind you trying to overrun. And it's very stressful for me.
Yeah. No, I know some people that have just chosen not to drive because, yeah, it is very stressful. Shout out to my Aunt Christina, if she's listening. She's probably not, but if you're listening, Kirsty, she was visiting here in Vietnam pre-COVID a couple of years ago, and she was on the back of my bike. We were in D4. And, I just pulled out, as you normally would. She screamed so loudly, she nearly burst my eardrums, and she grabbed my ribs so sore. I think I had bruises the next day from her being so terrified. But it's so scary though, because I just pulled out. There's a car coming towards you, but you're used to it. There's no problem. Yeah, the car's coming. I'm going to go around it. No worries. If you're not from here and you've just landed and someone puts you on the back of their bike and pulls into traffic with a 4x4 coming towards you, you're going to scream. But anyway, she loved it in the end. She loved it, didn't you, Kirsty? Now, what is a common scam in Vietnam?
Vietnamese are good at calculus, good at math.
And how does that scam you?
In terms of financials, join this ventures, the capitals, and the Forex things.
Well, these are like big scams, like big ones. I meant like they're going to take 20K off you or something like that. You're talking about big ones? Okay, I don't know much about them, thankfully. Now, If you could ask one of our future guests any question, what would you ask them?
Can I just force them to go to my exhibition?
So what would the question be? Why have you not been to my exhibition?
Exactly, and give them the cold eyes.
There you go. There you go. We'll ask every future guest that. Why have you not been to an art exhibition?
Maybe after I announce my exhibitions.
And last question, I love this one still. If Vietnam was a person, how would you describe them?
I think that if I describe Vietnam, let's just say Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon. Let's just say Saigon because it's my hometown and I understand it. And we have tons of provinces and different provinces way so different.
And I do make this mistake because I've only really lived in Vietnam that I classify... I've only lived in Saigon. I make this mistake that I classify all of Vietnam, but I really just mean Saigon because I've got no other real frame of reference, and Vietnam is a massively diverse country. So we'll say then, if Saigon was a person, how would you describe them?
It's probably a girl, not so old, around 20-ish age. She would have a lot of potential. She would know how to use that for her strength, but she would not know why yet. That's the stage for Saigon overall. We are a big city. We have all the things we need to grow, but we don't know how to grow yet. We don't know how to embrace ourselves if we ever make mistakes. For example, if you just go out and asking other people if we can sit here or if we can sit there. A lot of young Vietnamese, a lot of young Saigonese are quite shy yet. But talking back 10 years back, not that many people speak English. So I would say Saigon has a lot of potential. It's getting there.
See, I love this question mostly because I love the answers because they're nearly every one of them is different in some way and all accurate. So it's beautiful. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And even in 6 years, I remember getting here 6 years ago and not many people could speak English. And now I'm shocked every time when I walk into a store and I'll try and use my tiny bit of Vietnamese or to get my Translate app out, and then they just speak to me in like almost perfect English. And I'm like, oh, I look like an idiot now. Just talk to them in English. But Tâm Nguyễn, thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on. As I mentioned, I was really excited to talk about art in Vietnam because that, for me anyway, it's not something I see talked about too often. Probably in your world it's talked about all the time, but I wanted to help highlight that and showcase that and find out more about what's going on with art in Vietnam because I think, like everything here, it's really exciting for the future. So thank you very much for joining us on a Vietnam podcast.
Thank you. It's been a lovely section.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're like me, you may use your laptop at places where you have to use public Wi-Fi. This opens you up to digital snoopers. It's a massive problem. It can be your internet service provider, or you know who, looking at what you do online, or a cyber criminal trying to steal your bank passwords or credit card info, or even a hacker at the next table trying to steal your sensitive data. These days, it is vital that you keep your data safe. NordVPN keeps all of these snoopers away. It makes your internet activity private, protects you from accessing dangerous websites that are phishing for your data, and lets you enjoy your favorite content securely, even while away from home. And it's easy to use, even I could use it. I've actually been using NordVPN for years now here in Vietnam, and I'm excited to be an affiliate partner with them. I've used NordVPN to watch Netflix, BBC, Disney Plus with ease, and I also know that my information and data are safe from prying eyes, whoever they may be. Join now and you'll get 68% off and 3 months free when you go to my link, nordvpn.com/SMB. Just again, for those hard of hearing, nordvpn.com/SMB. The link is also in the show notes. I know nobody checks them out, but go check that out and you can get the link from wherever you are listening to this podcast. As an affiliate partner, it also means that I will get a small commission when you sign up, but at no extra cost to you. So not only will you be getting a great deal through 7 Million Bikes, you get a great VPN and you'll be supporting 7 Million Bikes podcast. Stay safe online and enjoy the shows you love. Any questions, just let me know. You know how to get in touch with me. And thanks for listening to this show. Cheers.